Good morning. This is Bill from Curious Cars and Auto House of Naples on a continually shitty, muggy, miserable Florida Wednesday. Again, the last couple of days I've railed about the weather, so I'm not going to keep it up, but nothing's changed. Everything's still miserable and crappy. I still can't see the car from the viewfinder because of the fogged up glasses. And all I can do is wish and hope that something happens in the future. I have this dream now of moving out of here in like May and finding some other home base and the mountains of North Carolina or some other lovely place that stays chilly, where I can just hang out for the whole summer, sell 4x4s to the people in the mountains and wait till I come back to Naples when it gets livable again. So anyway, I'm giving that some ponder because it just seems like the thing to do. I've really just had my fill of it down here, and I've had enough summers. I really honestly have. It just is one of those things. So it does mean I'll probably have to give up my position with the Florida Tourist Board, but what the hell, what are you going to do? Anyway, today I have this absolutely stunning, and I do mean gorgeous, 1986 Lincoln Town Car Cartier edition. Boy, was I happy to get this car. It just, acquired it recently on a trip. Fell in love with it from the moment that I saw it. Immediately bought it, didn't care what it cost, and now here it is, and I've been enjoying it for a couple days, and now it's time to, do a video and put it up on the market. So, all these cars, I can't tell you how many of them I'd like to own personally. I really would, but unlike the fat cats I know, your Peter types who have big garages full of fancy cars, I have a little postage stamp of a house now. It's on a drainage ditch that connects to the Gulf of Mexico, so that's fine. But the house itself is a tiny little bit of nothing with just a carport, and I just don't have the wherewithal to go get a building somewhere, even an old cheap steel building, to put stuff in. So I would be a terrible steward to any number of these cars that I've come across. So with great heartbreak, cars that I really, really love and would greedily like to own, I just can't. Because I destroy them. I've tried a couple of times, and I've watched them decline a little bit. It starts to break my heart, and then I just sell them and lament that I don't have them anymore. And I know this is going to be one of those cars. I already know it is, because I haven't seen an example like this in quite a long time, and boy, would I love to put it away. But the hell with it. Anyway, quick brief thing about the Town Car. So, Town Car itself, as a dedicated model, is not as old as a lot of people think it is. Essentially, the first car to be badged, to be modeled a Town Car, came out in 1981, and was this car, obviously an earlier version of it. The name Town Car did appear as a top trim level on Lincoln Continentals before that, so I know I've gotten flack in my uncle had a 77 Town Car. Well, no, he didn't. He had a 77 Continental with the Town Car badge, the Town Car package on it. This is not a Continental. This is an actual Lincoln Town Car, and it was the first of only 3 generations. They went on for quite a long time, for having only 35 years they made these things across 3 distinct generations, although they did all right on the same Panther platform. Anyway, when it came out, it was meant to be basically a temporary measure. The Panther platform had been developed to keep up with GM. They had come out with the B body, which downsized some of the luxury cars in the GM division. So Ford came out with the Panther to do the same thing. And, the Caprice would compete with the LTD or, the Crown Vic. The Mercury Grand Marquis would compete with Buicks and whatnot. And then this Town Car was going to compete with the big full-size Cadillacs, the Fleetwoods and the rear-wheel drive Bromes and such. But Lincoln knew Cadillac was going to go to front-wheel drive, downsize their luxury cars. They figured they'd be doing the same thing. And then all of a sudden, prices stabilized on fuel, and everybody calmed down. I don't know if that had anything to do with the election or Ronnie Reagan in '80, but maybe. And people just started sort of feeling comfortable again. And as a result, there was no longer this mad, crazy dash to go with tiny, crappy things. All of a sudden, people kind of went back to the idea of having large luxury cars. And, I love town cars. I always have. And I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, you've got, it's a full-sized car, body on frame, rear-wheel drive, V8 power. It's got a mile of hood, a trunk like the Grand Canyon, and interiors like upscale bordellos. I mean, it's just, frankly, what an American car is supposed to be. There were livery editions, designer editions, limousines. You've got acres of leather. You've got wire wheels. You've got premium audio. You've got a velvety boulevard ride. I mean, it is the traditional American luxury car. And town cars they carried on pretty much later than anyone else. They carried that torch all the way through 2011. And even though the Panther was kind of downsized, basically from what earlier, I mean, if you look at a Mark 7, or sorry, a Mark 5, I mean, the thing is friggin' enormous, and that's a two-door. It's bigger than this. So this is a smaller platform, but by the time 2011 rolled around, the Panther was enormous, and this car still feels pretty damn big today. Each one has its charms, each of the three generations. This one now is becoming a bona fide collectible. I wouldn't say it's quite there yet, but every time I see them at the collector car auctions, the prices are going up. I don't see as many out on the streets. There used to be a lot more of these things, and the really pristine ones are pulling real money. So these things are on their way to becoming a proper collectible car. The second generation, it's aspiring. You're still going to see running around Detroit or, big cities, one rusty, beat up, crappy paint looking one with a temporary spare on the back being driven by a single mom on her way to a tough job. So, they still are running those things in a variety of ways. They're not quite collectible. And of course, the third generation, they're still being used and bought up as basically cars, as good, solid, dependable used cars. I mean, I'm sure there's a few guys who are putting some away, but they're not even remotely thought of as a collectible yet. They're still in the stages of being used as automobiles, and they may go on to do something later on, but who the hell knows? I hear a bird going absolutely apeshit. I had to shut off the camera for a minute to make sure he wasn't coming in while I was looking the other way. Fortunately didn't. I don't see him, and I don't see any of those deer like we had yesterday. One of them bared their teeth at me, and it was terrifying. But anyway, hopefully we stay animal-free for the moment. Anyway, the name Town Car is a nicely American way of saying Sedanka de Ville, which is, of course, what it came from, or even Coupe de Ville, which are French terminologies for different type of, first a horse-drawn carriage, and then then of course, an automobile. And what that essentially was is there's a compartment out in the open with the driver, the chauffeur in it, suffering through the weather, and then an enclosed back in the rear for rich passengers. And I mean, this just strikes me as unbelievably cruel. You've got bloated fat cats in the back, belly laughing in the rear, lighting cigars taken from an ivory humidor with panda fur lining, and as they, giggle and laugh, and the poor schmuck up front is dealing with insects and rain and snow and whatever else, humidity, and it's just awful. I mean, abuses like that are what led to communism. And it's not to say that I would not like an ivory humidor filled with panda fur lining, but, at least I'm not going to stuff a chauffeur up there in the front and make him miserable while I hang out with high-priced call girls in the back. I've got that much going for me, so that's just rude. But anyway, it's got this posh lineage going back more than a century, and basically as does Lincoln itself. In fact, now more than a century. It's started by a guy named Henry Leland. A very interesting fellow, and what he did was he rebuilt, here's the scoop on this. He started Lincoln in 1917, but he had done something before. He had started a company called Cadillac, which to me is just fascinating that these two great competitors had the same guy at the roots. But in 1902, he was hired to sort of liquidate the assets of the Henry Ford Company. And he went in there, saw all the stuff that they had, and decided, no, man, don't liquidate. He went to Ford's investors. Ford was having a pissing contest with him over something, and said, forget it, don't liquidate. Let's start a company out of the ashes crashes. We'll call it Cadillac. We'll use this engine that I developed for a guy named Oldsmobile, and we'll have great success with it. And they did. So Ford's investors went with Leland. They built Cadillacs. They became very successful. They became, almost the standard of the world right away, as they say. And then Leland sold it to General Motors in 1909, made great money, and kept running the thing all the way through like 1917. But of course, then he got forced out, and he decided to start a company named Lincoln, and he did that by using a $10 million war bond. Oh my God, I'm telling you. Too much whiskey today, again, but it does keep the coronavirus at bay. So he gets a $10 million war bond. This is the way these guys did it back then. Starts this company named Lincoln to make V-12 aircraft motors for the war effort. Well, the war ends, so now he takes what he built there, started doing cars again. Didn't become quite as successful as he did with Cadillac, and in 1922, the company goes into receivership. Enter Henry Ford. He's the only guy who put a bid in. He put in a stupid low bid for the company, like $5 million. The judge said, no, that's ridiculous. He raised it to $8 million, which was still kind of ridiculous. And it was basically revenge from Henry Ford for Leland's part and the whole Cadillac thing with the investors. So it was essentially sold to Ford. He tortured Leland for a few months, let him run the company under massive amounts of torture, and then basically forced him out in disgrace, even escorted from the building. And there was Ford's revenge served cold. What a terrific bastard Ford was. He really, really was. But apparently he bought Lincoln anyway to placate his son Edsel. He thought it would be fun for the boy to have something to do. And I can't really relate. My dad has never really bought me a car company before. But I'm sure some people were pretty lucky. Anyway, Lincoln would become Ford's luxury mark from then to current. It's still going, and there we are. So fast forward to the beginning of the 1980s, and times are changing for the U.S. automakers. Everything's getting the downsized effect. People are scared of gas prices. There's more competition from Europe. American cars are bloated and behind the times and use too much fuel, and so everybody's in this insane rush to change. And some of the downsizing efforts worked, like the B-body we did the other day. And of course the Panther Platform, if not immediately, it did eventually work. But other ones just absolutely crashed and burned, like the Lincoln Versailles. Or the Cadillac Cimarron. I mean, those things are just historically thought of as absolutely terrible. So not all of the downsizing was a thing, but Cadillac and GM took it very, very seriously, and they started to develop what would become a front-wheel drive DeVille. I remember a pretty interesting story about William F. Buckley, if you remember that famous old guy. He had always driven these Cadillac factory limousines, and he wrote a big, long article when they came out with the front-drive cars in '85, saying, what the hell is this rinky-dink thing? And I can't remember what it was he moved to, but he refused to take one of those cars. Why he didn't take one of the rear-drive Cadillacs that were still being made, I don't know. But for whatever reason, the DeVille pissed him off, and he went somewhere else. Lincoln, which of course had been using this car as a temporary measure, noticed this. They noticed everybody getting kind of pissed off. So they held back, and they wanted to see what would happen. And sure enough, Cadillac had tremendous trouble selling the front-wheel drive cars. Lincoln would run ads pointing out how much they looked like the front-wheel drive cars of other GM brands like Buick and Oldsmobile. And meanwhile, a Lincoln Town Car would pull up to the valet. That was the most famous ad, and have, a tremendous amount of distinction. So, Lincoln and the Town Car found great success, not just through being a pretty good car, which it certainly was, but a big part of that was missteps from GM and from Cadillac. So they benefited terrifically. In fact, Lee Iacocca had fought to keep the Lincoln, this sort of older school traditional buyer luxury, and he was at war with Henry Ford too over it. Well, interestingly enough, Iacocca won, but it had more or less cost him his job. He ended up leaving and going on to head up Chrysler. So it must have pissed him off to see the town car have all this success, while, you know, he was the one who championed it through. And Iacocca, if it had been up to him, there would have been some front-wheel drive, or sorry, if it had been up to Ford, there would have been some front-wheel drive Lincolns that were like the Cadillacs, spectacularly failing. So, yeah, just one of those little things. There's a lot of personalities and egos in the car business, but so this thing was doing pretty well. You know, Cadillac was still making their big rear drive cars, but they cost more than this, and their engineering wasn't really all that much better. So a lot of traditional Caddy buyers went over to Lincoln, and in 1988, they sold 200,000 of these cars, which is actually a shitload. Oh God, there's the text again. Anyway, 200,000 of these cars, which is actually a shitload, and not bad for a car that was meant to be a you know, little temporary holdover for a couple of years. And I guess that sales thing led to them developing a second-gen town car, which they weren't necessarily going to do, but they decided to go ahead and do anyway. And that worked pretty well. That helped sales rebound. By that time, all of the livery, taxi companies, transportation companies had switched over to Lincoln because they were simple, easy to maintain, and would go for hundreds of thousands of miles. I slurred that out. So Lincoln was set, and that's why they rode this Panther-based Lincoln all the way through 2011 was when the last one was made. In fact, they had to give these companies warning for a couple of years to, hey, you know, get a bunch of these while you can, or, you know, figure out what you're going to do after. And they gave them time to get ready because so many companies depended on town cars. I mean, there was a time you'd go to New York City in the money district, and you could walk from one end of Manhattan to the other just on the hoods and trunks of, you know, black Lincoln town cars, bringing the posh and elite people wherever they needed to be. So pretty special cars, pretty interesting, and they've gone on to be a real piece of automotive history despite humble beginnings. So all right, look, I'm dripping again. I've got to dry myself off, and then we're just going to leap and dive directly into this particular car. So sorry for that big rambling history. It just sort of, I don't know. Sometimes you got to get it out. I thought about doing 1986, but we'll do that another time. So anyway, hold on for a minute and we'll keep going. All right, so let's do it. So here we have a 1986, and again, this is a Lincoln Town Car Cartier edition. There were different levels of Town Car, signature, executive, that sort of thing. Many of them actually throughout the years, but in 1986, the Cartier was the top of the line. This was peak Panther in 86. This was as fancy a Panther Platform Town Car as you could get. And it had a price tag to match. This thing would have stickered probably in the 30th. Yeah, maybe a little over, a little under, but call it 30 grand. More than 70,000 in today's dollars. So this was by no means a cheap car, although it did work out to be less expensive than Cadillac, at least when you're talking about more base models. So that's why they did end up selling a bunch of Lincolns. It's finished in a two-tone, which is you just don't see two-tone stuff anymore, which breaks my heart because I love two-tone cars. Maybe I'm a product of my age, but I really like them. And I do miss seeing them. This has crystal metallic on top and titanium metallic on the bottom. And then, of course, being the Cartier, you have this incredible chrome strip down the rocker panels, which is just absolutely gorgeous. You get a half vinyl top with opera lights, a very formal-looking roofline. You get the Rolls-Royce grille, Iacocca's Rolls-Royce grille with the 4 square lamps. 85 saw a refresh of these cars, a little bit of a redesign, you know, not anything major, just mostly cosmetic and a little bit of mechanicals, but the bumpers became more integrated, in the older versions they hung over the sides. Now they're sort of smoothed into the body a little bit better with those panels, and yeah, you know, I think it looks better. This one has the optional sort of wire wheels. Pretty much anyone who saw them thought they were wires because of how they were made. They're not caps, but they're not true wires either. That said, you won't have to deal with the crap you have to deal with true wires, so not altogether a bad thing. Lovely expanses of chrome, the bumper, the headlight surrounds, the parking lamp leading edge surrounds with the Lincoln logo. You've got chrome at the back of the hood, chrome trim around the wheel wells. You've got chrome around all the windows, chrome accents on the quarter top. You know, Lincoln knew what the people who bought these cars wanted, and they gave it to them, even right down to opera lights. These things on most cars, you actually see them some faded to yellow. You don't see that little silver trim still in good shape. This car is an absolute time machine. I don't think it's one owner, but I think that the second guy who bought it, and forgive me, I'll look it up to be sure, but I think the second guy who bought it with almost no miles and just kept it as a collector car for like at least the last 15 years or so. It's just been in air-conditioned storage, and you can absolutely tell. I mean, it is a miracle. I just have never seen a first-gen town car in this condition in the last 10 or 15 years. And I've had some really nice town cars, but absolutely nothing like this. Anyway, they integrated the taillights into the rear quarters a little bit better. They formalized the trunk. They made this band that connects the two taillights with stainless on top. Very, very pretty. And just did a very nice job updating the design of the car. And, you know, it's one of those rear cars where I think the refresh does look better than the original. And there you see the Cartier logo. Maybe that flies. I mean, that's where Lincoln let it down a little bit on the town car thing. They pick a French jewelry company to sponsor their cars. Anyway, it does have the traditional little flip-up keyhole cover, which is nice. And here you see the cavernous trunk that was absolutely beloved by livery companies and taxi companies and airport services everywhere. An absolutely amazing, beautiful, deep trunk. No, I'm not going to get into the stupid mafia thing. It's been done 10 million times. Anyway, sorry for my bag of crap. Here you can see a dash cover, which was on the car, and I presume the guy used it. Those dashes they have a propensity for cracking, even if they're not really sun-baked. So kudos to the guy for, you know, running a dash cover before that happens. Very often those are put on as a Band-Aid afterwards. So this guy actually used it in the intended way, which was to protect the dash. But everything nice and proper under there. Lovely to look at. Does have the soft close trunk, which is still working. Love that. Another thing you just don't see anymore, that little motorized sound. I don't know. It's the cars of my youth. Have a look under the hood. You love the hood ornament. Okay, so this was new, I think, in 85, maybe 86 in Canada, but 85 down here. And that was getting the sequential fuel-injected 5-liter, 4.9, 5-liter V8 that replaced the carburetor, the throttle body injectors that were before it, and it was a great leap forward for this engine. The earlier ones, they're not bad at all. They're good engines, but they're a little bit more difficult to keep tuned. This thing is kind of set and forget. You never have to think about it. Just a terrific, terrific engine. Obviously similar to what's used. I think the Mustang GT had more performance tuning. You know, this has been detuned for luxury, but basically the same motor that ran across the Ford platform into the pickup trucks and was an absolute workhorse. You could put hundreds of thousands of miles on this thing without too much problem. Love the big Vanna, the coffee can. It should say Folgers on it. I just think that's ridiculous. That is a vacuum canister to store vacuum for whatever use it's going to have. But anyway, everything nice and proper under there. During the 80s, they didn't have the most beautiful engine compartments. You got into crap like this, which I just think is bizarre. You'd never see that spaghetti of wires in a modern car. They'd hide it under some plastic cover. But I think it's still a more honest engine compartment than most stuff you get today. And definitely, you know, like new under the hood of this 22,000 mile car. So very nice to see. See, it also has the VIN stickers. That's on the fenders, both of them. You also have one on the hood somewhere. I just saw it earlier. Yeah, there it is. And that's like what was on Mercedes-Benz products. It didn't just help with theft. You know, if the car was stolen, you could theoretically trace those panels, although they immediately would be pulled off, I'm sure, by whatever thieves took them. But it does now, in a collector market, show that the car has all original body panels, as this one does, and all original paint as well, which is quite nice. Alright, you see it has this really cool little analog thermometer which works and illuminates, by the way. I took a picture of that with my phone today. The air blows in here and then it registers the temperature at the back on a dial, which I just think is really cool. You also get Ford's famous electronic entry keypad. That's a feature they're still using today, and it works pretty well. So neat stuff. There you see a Cartier badge in the opera window. This was the only one that had that. The other editions of this year just had a Lincoln emblem in there. In the back, the Canadians are going to be thrilled. They're going to be extremely chipper back here. You can fit 3 of them if you want, but 2 will get an armrest. They're going to be resting on Cartier ensconced seats with rich gray Oxford leather, and then these beautiful little Cartier velour inserts, just absolutely lovely. They've got map pockets here, nice place to stuff a revolver or a pistol, and you can see everything back on the package shelf, nice and proper. All the headliner nice and tight, just a really nice, sweet car, and of course expanses of deep pal carpeting. I can't imagine how many cows gave their life for this thing. I mean, even with the velour inserts, there's still acres and acres of leather in this car. Door panels, nice. They don't... You know, again, all U.S. car makers had cheapened up a bit from earlier times. I mean, these things are not quite to the same quality that they would have been 20 years before. But they're fine. You've got this sort of fake wood, which is normal. You got ashtrays because people still smoked then. You've got a light switch and your window switch, of course, and little bits of Illumi chrome trim and chrome trim on the door handle. It just all looks nice. Very nice place to sit. You get illuminated door locks as well. Okay, up here, same story. You've got this beautiful split bench with power on both sides, more Oxford leather, more Cartier velour, which is not stained, by the way. That's just the graining of the seat. Absolutely beautiful with the Cartier logo in there. You can also fit 3 across. You can make it a 6-passenger car. Door panel, nice. You've got your mirror controls, your seat controls, your window lock and door lock. All very lovely stuff. And how cool is the little smoker's window this thing has? Instead of flipping out the way it does in an old Volkswagen, it's power controlled like it would be, nothing else. So anyway, let's just hop in and see what we got. I'm going to fire this thing up and get some AC going because I am dripping again. All right, there you can see the washer fluid we need, and 0 miles to empty. Wonderful. It's not actually true. These cars have an issue with their fuel sending units. This one was repaired because the digital display on that side works fine. It had a quarter tank yesterday. I filled it up. It went to a full tank, and then I drove 8 miles, so it went down a little bit. But for some reason, it's not tripping the distance to empty computer, so I don't know. I know it's very tough to find that sending unit. They don't make it anymore, so oh my god, we need to get some AC going. Good lord. Okay, get that down. Perfect. All right, so here you have the optional digital dash in this car anyway. You've got a digital speedometer, you've got your fuel gauge, and then you've got that trip computer over there, which I haven't set yet, but that gives you different, I don't know, I mean, you can, it's early navigation, if you will. You can put in how long your trip is, and when it counts off that number of miles, it'll tell you you've reached your destination. Whatever. I don't think that's entirely necessary, but it works fine. For the oh god, now I've hit check. Okay, I got out of that. You put clock on and you just leave it on the clock. It's got this weird Ford tilt that tilts the axis of it is right at the wheel. So the tilt is kind of strange, and it's not my favorite kind of tilt, but whatever, it's fine. You got some warning lights over here. You've got auto on lights and auto dimming high beams right there. You've got your nice big chrome stalks for the for the wipers, for the turn signals and high beams, and of course your transmission thing. You do have an analog odometer with a analog PRND spindle there, whatever the hell you call those, and there you see just 20,000 miles on the clock of this thing. Got a nice proper horn with cruise control, switches on it. You've got freezing air coming out of these vents, which is absolutely fantastic. And then you've got the upgraded JBL premium sound, which actually still sounds pretty damn good. I presume because the guy didn't have a teenage daughter who went out and blasted the stereo all the time. You got an ashtray. Doubt this thing. Looks like someone may have lit one at some point. Probably the chauffeur, the valet. You got a little bit of pullback on that glove box, but far less than you usually see. There's the wheel lock and a nice set of books inside, and of course a trunk release. And because you've got a digital clock now, there's no need for a Cartier clock. Kind of a shame. So you just get a Cartier badge there. There's a very standard rearview mirror. You got a little powdery cocaine thing, mirror for the driver and for the passenger, because it was the 1980s, so probably even guys in their 60s going to the golf course took a little toot before they hit the front nine. Oh, I'm kidding. The 80s wasn't like that. Anyway, I love the way it looks out the window of this thing. Look at the expanses of hood, led by these two knife crease fenders on either side, and the Lincoln hood ornament leading the way. It just has a lovely view from the front. You can also see what I was talking about, that original dashboard completely uncracked, which is nice. Very often they're not. Here I'm going to run this for fun. So when I put this window down, goes the smoking window first, or vent window, whatever you want to call it. Down it goes, and then the main window follows. So all very cool stuff. A very neat town car feature. The ride of this car is precisely what the targeted market for this car wanted. It is soft, it is smooth, it is just... You've got the over-assisted steering, you've got the over-assisted brakes, you've got a suspension that just soaks up bumps. You don't feel it at all. You feel a tremendous insulation from the road, which is just absolutely lovely. And that is what American luxury car driving is all about. It's this velvety boulevard cruiser thing that just feels fantastic. And you know what? You know, all these old guys drive Lincoln Town Cars, and some of the young snotty kids give a chuckle. You listen to your elders, my young friend. I mean, these guys went through World War II. They went, 70 years or 80 years of life experience before they figured out what car they wanted to have. And they're not wrong. I mean, there are if you don't want to burn rubber or run around a racetrack, there is very few cars out there that give you the joy and feel of driving that a town car does, or, a big full-frame American automobile. I imagine that's why so many people went to pickup trucks and full-size SUVs when, the government and car companies colluded to do away with the big rear-wheel drive cars. People ended up buying trucks instead of little front-wheel drive things, so that's probably why you see F-150s everywhere. So anyway, look, I'm not going to ramble on and on. I've done town cars before. You know how great they drive. You know how much I love them. They're fantastic. And this one is as new and pristine a town car from the first generation as I've ever seen. I don't know if there were ones this nice when they were new. I mean, it's just perfect. If you have an interest, it'll be for sale at Auto House of Naples, 239-263-8500, on the web at autohousenaples.com. Otherwise, we've got more fun stuff coming up. We'll have that Matador on the way, eventually a Cordoba. I have a Beetle, God help me, and we'll see. There might even be a Ferrari in the mix. So thank you very much for having a look. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the comments. It's great to hear from everyone, and I just absolutely am honored that people continue to watch these things. I really am. I really am. I don't know what it says about you, but thank you for doing it. So take care, and we will see you with the next one.